today's episode, we're exploring 5 horrifying chimpanzee attacks that ended in tragedy, from a 31-year-old behavioral psychology PhD student to a veteran zookeeper trapped by a system malfunction. But first, let's begin with the first story, where a child's innocent curiosity would lead to an unimaginable nightmare. It was May 15, 2016, and the quiet rural neighborhood outside Bakersfield, California, was settling into another warm spring afternoon. The sprawling properties, separated by chain-link fences and dotted with aging mobile homes, provided the perfect setting for families seeking affordable living away from the city's chaos. 8-year-old Tommy Ramirez had just returned home from school to find his small house empty once again, his parents already departed for their evening shifts at the local processing plant. Tommy was a bright, curious second grader with an infectious smile and an adventurous spirit that often got him into minor trouble. His parents, Maria and Roberto, worked double shifts 6 days a week to make ends meet, leaving Tommy to spend most afternoons alone or with elderly neighbors who kept a watchful eye on the energetic boy. The Ramirez family had moved to this rural area 2 years earlier, drawn by the lower rent and the promise of a safer environment for their only child. Next door lived Earl Hutchins, a 67-year-old retired circus performer who had spent decades working with exotic animals in traveling shows across the American Southwest. Earl's property was larger than most in the neighborhood, featuring a reinforced chain-link enclosure that housed his most prized possession, Buster, a 12-year-old male chimpanzee that Earl had raised from infancy. Earl genuinely believed that Buster was as harmless as a large dog, often allowing neighborhood children to observe the chimp through the fence while he performed simple tricks. Tommy had been fascinated by Buster since the day his family moved in, spending countless hours watching the chimp through the chain-link barrier that separated their properties. Earl had noticed the boy's interest and occasionally brought Buster close to the fence so Tommy could see him better, never imagining that his kindness was creating a dangerous familiarity between the child and the powerful primate. Chimpanzees share about 98% of our DNA, but their limb leverage, fast twitch bias, and grip make their short, explosive attacks devastating. Direct, in vivo bite pressure figures for chimps aren't well established, so rather than PSI, what matters here is how they bite and tear. Rapid, targeted strikes to the face and hands, with canines that puncture deeply and jaws that can crush small bones. Against a child, that combination is catastrophic within seconds. That afternoon, Tommy had been playing in his backyard with his favorite toy truck, a bright red metal vehicle that he carried everywhere. Earl was inside his house taking his usual afternoon nap, leaving Buster alone in his outdoor enclosure. Tommy's curiosity finally overcame his parents' warnings about staying away from the neighbor's property. He approached the chain-link fence and discovered that a section near the back corner had been damaged by recent storms, creating a gap just large enough for a small boy to squeeze through. Tommy crawled through the gap in the fence, clutching his red truck as he entered Buster's territory. The 150-pound chimpanzee initially appeared curious and playful, approaching the boy with what seemed like friendly interest. Buster's demeanor changed the moment he grabbed the toy truck from Tommy's hands. When Tommy reached out to retrieve his beloved truck, Buster interpreted the gesture as a direct challenge to his dominance. The attack began when Buster grabbed Tommy's outstretched arm with both hands, his powerful grip immediately fracturing the boy's radius and ulna bones. Tommy's screams of pain and terror echoed across the property as Buster's massive jaws clamped down on his face, the chimp's 2-inch canine teeth puncturing through soft tissue and bone. The primate targeted the most vulnerable areas: eyes, ears, and fingers, the exact zones chimpanzees instinctively mutilate. Buster's bites came in explosive bursts, in the typical dominance-driven pattern seen in captive chimpanzee aggression rather than any form of predatory feeding behavior. The chimp's attack was driven by territorial instincts and the need to assert complete dominance over the perceived intruder in his space. The violent assault continued for nearly 2 minutes. Earl was awakened by Tommy's screams and rushed outside to find the horrific scene unfolding in his backyard, but his attempts to intervene proved futile against the enraged chimp's superior strength. Paramedics and animal control officers worked together to tranquilize Buster and extract Tommy from the enclosure, but the boy had already succumbed to massive trauma and blood loss. The investigation revealed that Earl had been keeping Buster illegally for over a decade, violating multiple state and federal federal regulations regarding exotic animal ownership. Following the initial response, Buster was sedated and transported off-site. He was later euthanized following CDC primate protocols, which are required for any primate involved in a serious attack due to the risk of disease transmission. Earl faced criminal charges for maintaining an illegal exotic animal and child endangerment, while Tommy's family filed wrongful death lawsuits against both Earl and the county for failing to enforce existing regulations. But backyard chimps weren't the only dangerous primates that turned deadly. In Atlanta, a research assistant's overconfidence in her relationship with a captive chimpanzee would lead to a fatal encounter in a supposedly controlled environment. It was September 8, 2014, and the privately funded behavioral research facility outside Atlanta, Georgia, was winding down from another busy day of primate studies and cognitive research. The modern facility housed over 200 primates in carefully controlled environments designed to advance scientific understanding while ensuring both human and animal safety. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, a 31-year-old behavioral psychology PhD student, was working late in the chimpanzee research wing, determined to complete another session with Coco, a 15-year-old female chimpanzee who had become the focus of her dissertation research. Sarah had been studying primate intelligence and social behavior for over 3 years, with the past 8 months dedicated specifically to working with Coco. She had developed what she believed was a unique bond with the intelligent female chimp, often spending 12-hour days observing and interacting with her subject. The research facility maintained strict protocols for human-primate interactions, requiring multiple safety barriers and the presence of at least 2 researchers during any direct contact with the animals. However, Sarah had grown increasingly confident in her relationship with Coco and had begun bending these rules, often working alone during evening hours when fewer staff members were present. Coco had been showing signs of stress over the past several weeks due to changes in the facility's routine and the introduction of new researchers to her environment. Despite these warning signs, Sarah remained convinced that her relationship with Coco transcended normal human-primate boundaries. Chimpanzees in research facilities retain all their natural instincts and behaviors despite years of human contact and structured environments. Adult females typically weigh between 90 and 130 pounds and possess incredible strength, speed, and agility that make them extremely dangerous when agitated. Their intelligence, while remarkable, also makes them more unpredictable than other primates, as they can plan attacks and use tools as weapons. That evening, Sarah had planned to conduct a hands-on intelligence test that required direct physical interaction with Coco. Sarah entered Coco's enclosure without following proper safety procedures, carrying her research materials and a clipboard to document the chimp's responses. Coco initially appeared calm and receptive, approaching Sarah with what seemed like friendly curiosity. The attack came without warning or apparent provocation. Coco suddenly lunged at Sarah with explosive force, her 120-pound frame knocking the researcher backward onto the concrete floor of the enclosure. The chimp's powerful hands grabbed Sarah's head and shoulders, her 2-inch canine teeth immediately finding purchase in Sarah's face and neck. Coco's jaws clamped down on Sarah's face with devastating force, her bite pressure crushing facial bones and severing major blood vessels. Coco clamped onto Sarah's upper arm and shoulder, using her weight and leverage to drag the struggling researcher deeper into the enclosure in short, forceful bursts whenever she attempted to pull away. Coco's assault focused on Sarah's face, hands, and arms, tearing at the vulnerable areas that chimpanzees instinctively target during dominance displays. The attack was driven by stress and territorial aggression that had been building for weeks. Security personnel reached the enclosure within 3 minutes of the alarm and deployed acoustic deterrents and barrier shields from outside the containment line. Standard protocol required breaking the chimp's focus before any attempt at sedation, so responders used blast horns and visual panels to force distance between Coco and Sarah. Only after Coco briefly disengaged did the sedation team fire a tranquilizer dart from outside the barrier. But Sarah had already sustained fatal injuries injuries from the brief but devastating attack. Sarah died en route to Grady Memorial Hospital, her promising research career cut short by a moment of overconfidence in dealing with one of nature's most powerful primates. The investigation revealed multiple protocol violations that had contributed to the fatal encounter. Following Federal Review Board clearance and extensive behavioral evaluation, Coco was transferred to a specialized sanctuary facility in Florida under permanent isolation protocols with no public contact permitted. The facility implemented comprehensive safety reforms, including mandatory two-person teams for all primate interactions and electronic monitoring systems to prevent unauthorized access to animal enclosures. But research facilities weren't the only places where chimpanzee encounters turned deadly. In Louisiana, a retired police officer's volunteer work at a sanctuary would end in tragedy when a simple mistake put him face-to-face with a traumatized rescue chimp. It was July 3, 2017, and the sprawling grounds of a privately run primate sanctuary in rural Louisiana were alive with the sounds of rescued chimpanzees enjoying their retirement from decades of medical research and entertainment industry exploitation. The 50-acre facility served as a permanent home for over 80 chimpanzees, providing them with naturalistic environments and specialized care designed to help them recover from years of captivity and abuse. Mike Torres, a 45-year-old recently retired police officer, was spending his holiday volunteering at the sanctuary, finding purpose and meaning in caring for animals that had suffered trauma similar to what he had witnessed during his law enforcement career. Mike had been volunteering at Haven Hills for 6 months, drawn to the sanctuary's mission of providing refuge for chimpanzees who could never be returned to the wild. His 20-year career with the Shreveport Police Department had ended abruptly due to a back injury sustained during a high-speed pursuit, leaving him struggling to find direction in his forced retirement. The sanctuary work had given him a sense of purpose while allowing him to use his calm demeanor and crisis management skills in a completely different environment. The sanctuary housed chimpanzees with diverse backgrounds, from former research subjects to retired circus performers, each carrying psychological scars from their previous lives. Mike had been assigned to work with some of the more challenging residents, including Caesar, a 150-pound male chimpanzee who had been rescued from an illegal breeding operation where he had suffered years of abuse and neglect. Caesar's aggressive tendencies and distrust of humans made him one of the sanctuary's most dangerous residents, requiring specialized handling procedures and maximum security protocols. Mike had developed what he believed was a professional understanding of Caesar's behavior patterns, spending hours observing the massive chimp and learning to read his moods and triggers. Caesar had shown some signs of improvement under Mike's patient care, occasionally accepting food directly from the retired officer and displaying less aggressive behavior during routine maintenance activities. Chimpanzees who have suffered abuse and trauma often develop complex psychological disorders that make them extremely unpredictable and dangerous. Adult male chimpanzees in captive settings can reach around 150 pounds, with some heavier individuals due to reduced activity and higher calorie diets. Their canines aren't razor sharp like a predator's, but they are large, pointed, and strong enough to tear flesh and fracture bone during dominance aggression. That afternoon, Mike was conducting routine cleaning of Caesar's enclosure, a task that required the chimp to be secured in his holding cell while Mike worked in the main habitat area. Mike had performed this routine dozens of times without incident, but on this particular day, a phone call from his wife distracted him at a crucial moment. During the call, Mike had failed to properly secure the manual shift gate that separated Caesar's holding area from the main enclosure, a critical safety measure that prevented the chimp from accessing areas where humans were working. Mike entered the cleaning corridor with his equipment, completely unaware that Caesar had pushed through the unsecured gate and was now free to move throughout the enclosure. Caesar appeared at the end of the corridor without warning, his massive 150-pound frame blocking Mike's only exit route. The attack began when Caesar charged down the narrow corridor with explosive force, his powerful legs propelling his massive frame toward Mike with unstoppable momentum. The chimp's powerful hands grabbed Mike's head and shoulders, immediately establishing the physical dominance that would determine the encounter's outcome. Caesar's jaws clamped down on Mike's neck with devastating force, his 2-inch canine teeth puncturing vital structures while his bite tore deep into the neck and severed major blood vessels. Caesar's attack focused on Mike's face, hands, and throat, tearing at the vulnerable areas that chimpanzees instinctively target during dominance displays. The chimp's powerful hands pulled at Mike's hair, while his jaws snapped in rapid bursts, biting and tearing exposed flesh with explosive aggression rather than any feeding intent. Caesar's large canines found purchase in Mike's ears and scalp, ripping away tissue as he established complete dominance over his victim. The chimp continued his assault by grabbing and twisting Mike's arms, his powerful grip causing additional fractures, while his teeth targeted the soft tissue of Mike's throat and face. Caesar's attack was driven by years of trauma and the territorial instincts. His reaction treated Mike as a direct threat to his space and responded with rapid, targeted aggression. Mike died from severe head and neck trauma before paramedics could reach him, his body showing the devastating effects of Caesar's focused assault on his most vulnerable areas. Caesar was successfully tranquilized and moved to a maximum security enclosure designed for the sanctuary's most dangerous residents. The investigation revealed that Mike's failure to properly secure the manual shift gate had directly caused the fatal encounter. The small sanctuary immediately implemented redundant safety systems and revised all protocols to require multiple confirmation steps and electronic monitoring before any volunteer could enter an animal enclosure. Mike's family established a memorial fund in his honor to support sanctuary safety improvements and volunteer training programs. But sanctuaries weren't the only places where chimpanzee encounters turned deadly. In rural Oklahoma, a widow's refusal to acknowledge her pet's dangerous nature would lead to a fatal attack in her own living room. It was November 20th, 2015, and the modest ranch house of Janet Kowalski sat quietly in the rural Oklahoma countryside, surrounded by rolling hills and scattered oak trees that provided a peaceful setting for the 52-year-old widow's unconventional lifestyle. Janet had been living alone with Precious, her 14-year-old female chimpanzee, since her husband's death from cancer 3 years earlier. The chimp had become Janet's constant companion and surrogate child, filling the emotional void left by her husband's passing and her inability to have children of her own. Janet had acquired Precious as an infant from a private breeder, raising the chimp like a human child in her suburban home before moving to the rural property where they could have more space and privacy. Over the years, Janet had developed an elaborate fantasy about her relationship with Precious, like teaching her to eat at the dinner table and even allowing her to sleep in a bedroom decorated with stuffed animals and children's furniture. Janet genuinely believed that Precious was more human than animal, often introducing her to visitors as her adopted daughter. The local community had grown increasingly concerned about Janet's living situation as Precious matured into a powerful adult female weighing over 140 pounds. Neighbors had filed multiple complaints with county authorities about the dangerous animal living in their midst, but Janet's remote location and the lack of clear jurisdiction had allowed the situation to continue unchecked. Janet dismissed all concerns about Precious's potential for violence, insisting that her years of love and care had eliminated any wild instincts the chimp might possess. Janet's denial about Precious's true nature had become more pronounced as the chimp entered her reproductive years and began displaying increasingly aggressive and unpredictable behavior. Female chimpanzees, like males, can show sudden, severe aggression in captivity, especially under stress, resource competition, or when restraint is attempted. In facilities and private homes, aggression is most often linked to dominance dynamics, prior handling history, and environmental triggers. That evening, Precious had been pacing restlessly through the house, displaying stress behaviors common in captive chimps under environmental pressure and routine disruption. Janet attempted to hide Precious's medication in her favorite food, but the intelligent chimp immediately detected the foreign substances and refused to eat. When gentle coaxing failed to work, Janet made the fatal decision to physically restrain Precious and force her to take the medication. The attack began the moment Janet grabbed Precious's arms to restrain her for the forced medication. The physical restraint triggered a dominance outburst as she interpreted Janet's actions as a direct threat to her autonomy and safety. Precious knocked Janet to the living room floor with devastating force, her powerful arms and legs working together to pin her victim while her jaws sought vulnerable targets. The chimp's 2-inch canine canine teeth found purchase in Janet's face and neck, delivering crushing bite force that fractured facial bones and severed major blood vessels. Precious continued her high-intensity biting and tearing, typical of primate dominance aggression, focusing her attack on Janet's face, hands, and arms, areas that chimpanzees instinctively target to establish complete dominance over perceived threats. The 140-pound chimpanzee's assault reflected dominance aggression in a high-stress, captive context, her powerful jaws working rapidly to inflict damage while her hands grabbed and twisted Janet's limbs. The attack continued with the relentless intensity characteristic of chimpanzee dominance displays as Precious's years of suppressed wild instincts finally overwhelmed her conditioning. Police officers arrived to find Precious still attacking Janet's motionless body, the chimp's aggressive behavior making it impossible for paramedics to reach the victim. The officers were forced to shoot Precious to stop the ongoing assault. Janet died from massive trauma and blood loss, her fantasy of living peacefully with a wild animal finally shattered by biological reality. The investigation revealed that Janet had been keeping Precious illegally for over a decade, violating multiple state and federal regulations regarding exotic animal ownership. Janet's death prompted immediate changes to Oklahoma's exotic pet laws and stricter enforcement of existing regulations. The incident became a cautionary tale about the dangers of treating wild animals as pets, regardless of how long they had been in captivity. But private homes weren't the only places where chimpanzee encounters turned deadly. In Miami, a veteran zookeeper's routine morning would become a nightmare when outdated safety systems failed at a struggling roadside attraction. It was February 14th, 2018, and the Everglades Exotic Animal Park, a small roadside attraction outside Miami, was preparing for another day of operations despite the financial struggles that had plagued the facility for years. The 15-acre park housed over 60 animals in aging enclosures, relying on minimal staff and outdated equipment to maintain operations as visitor numbers continued to decline. Carlos Mendoza, a 39-year-old veteran zookeeper with 15 years of experience working with primates, had taken the job at the struggling facility after being laid off from a larger zoo due to budget cuts. Carlos had built his reputation as one of the region's most knowledgeable keepers, but financial necessity had forced him to accept work at facilities with lower safety standards than he was accustomed to. He was a devoted father of 3 young children who needed the steady income, even if it meant working with outdated equipment and minimal backup support. Carlos had been working with Bruno, a 160-pound male chimpanzee, for 8 months since joining the facility's skeleton crew. Bruno was a former research subject who had been retired to the roadside park after spending his early years in a medical facility where he had been used for behavioral studies and pharmaceutical testing. The Great Ape area consisted of a single enclosure with a basic holding cell separated by a manual sliding door operated by a simple latch mechanism. Carlos worked alone most mornings as the facility could only afford minimal staffing during off-peak hours. The park's owner had repeatedly delayed safety upgrades, prioritizing visitor attractions over employee protection systems. Chimpanzees retired from research settings often develop abnormal behavioral patterns due to years of confinement, repetitive testing, and limited social interaction. Adult males in captivity can weigh between 140 and 170 pounds, with increased body mass compared to wild populations due to reduced movement and calorie-dense diets. Their strength is not just a matter of muscle, but leverage. Chimps use their entire upper body to generate short, explosive bursts of force, making even routine handling dangerous if containment boundaries fail. Former research chimps, especially those with a history of stress-induced behaviors, are known to fixate on enclosure weak points, repeatedly testing latches, hinges, and door frames over time. When such individuals gain access outside restricted zones, their reactions are driven by territorial control rather than predatory intent, resulting in rapid, targeted aggression toward the face, hands, and ears, primary zones in chimpanzee dominance attacks. That morning, Carlos followed his usual routine of checking the manual latch system that controlled access between Bruno's holding cell and main enclosure. What Carlos didn't realize was that Bruno had been repeatedly testing the aging latch mechanism out of persistent fixation, a behavior common in former research chimps who develop obsessive interactions with their environment. The attack came without warning as Bruno emerged from his position and immediately knocked Carlos to the concrete floor. The chimp's powerful hands grabbed Carlos's head and arms as his territorial instincts took over. Bruno's 2-inch canine teeth found purchase in Carlos's face and hands, delivering crushing bite force that caused severe facial trauma and severed fingers. Bruno's assault reflected the high-intensity aggression characteristic of stressed chimpanzees, focusing his attack on Carlos's face, hands, and ears, the primary targets of chimpanzee dominance displays. Carlos died from massive facial trauma and blood loss before paramedics could reach the remote facility. The investigation revealed that the aging latch mechanism had been compromised for months, with Bruno's persistent testing finally causing complete failure. The roadside park was immediately shut down by state authorities, and Bruno was relocated to a maximum security facility designed for dangerous animals. Thanks for watching. Click the next video that will show you why our closest genetic relatives remain the most dangerous animals on Earth.